Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cheryl if you're new here, and I just want to say thank you to all of my new subscribers. I know we've all started following each other because of Twitter and promoting small booktubers, so I've gotten a lot of new subscribers in the last couple days. I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. I've tried to subscribe back to as many of you as I can and watch as many of your videos as I can because we gotta support each other. But anyway, if this is the first video you are watching from me, welcome. If not, welcome back. And today we are here to discuss my favorite either fantasy books or fantasy series. And I'm lumping series just as a whole. I'm not picking my favorite of the series. It's just, that's a lot of work. This encompasses both adult fantasy and YA fantasy. So without further ado, let's just get into this. These are in no particular order, by the way. The first series I want to talk about today is the Wardstone Chronicles by Joseph Delaney. Now, if you have been on my channel before, you've heard me talk about this series many times over and just rave about how much I love it. But this starts as a late middle grade, early YA series, and it kind of progresses into darker YA as the series progresses. And this series follows Tom Ward. He is the apprentice to the local spook. The spook is a man who makes boggarts and demons and witches and ghosts and all manners of things that go bump in the night disappear. He fights them. They fight the dark, just as an ambiguous term. And Tom is apprenticing him, and each book they kind of have to deal with a new threat, a new evil. And what I really appreciate about this series is that, especially that it is late middle grade with the first couple books, is that it doesn't talk down to its reader. It doesn't think its reader is stupider. It doesn't try to belittle its reader at all. It talks to them as if they're adults. It just is a more simplistic style of writing and storytelling, and I appreciate that, because you do read some middle grade where it's really toned down as if it expects its reader not to be able to understand, but this deals with some really heavy topics. It also deals with morally gray characters. Both Tom, the spook, and just a bunch of other characters you meet throughout this series are all pretty morally ambiguous. They make decisions that may not be the best, and shit hits the fan because of those decisions. These are just really easy to read, and I fly through them every time I pick them up. One of my favorite things about this series, which I've mentioned before, is that for each chapter heading, like chapter 1, chapter 2, there are full illustrations usually on the page that contribute to the story in some way, and they're just that extra little touch. This story is just so good. It's grim, it's dark at times. I genuinely don't know if there's going to be a happy ending for Tom, because a lot of shit has happened. I'm on book 8 or something by this point. There's probably, I think, about 13 books in the series now, and I'm on book 8, and the stakes are really high. A lot of bad things have happened, so I genuinely don't know how it's going to end. Don't know if it's going to be a happy ending for anyone, but there you go. This is my first series I'm talking about, and it's probably the one I'm most attached to on this list. The next series I want to talk about today is An Ember in the Ashes by Saba Tahir. Like the Wardstone Chronicles, this is not a happy series. This series is heavily inspired by the Roman Empire, and thus is very militaristic in a lot of ways. It also deals with slavery and subjugation of another race, and just a lot of heavy topics, and there's a lot of brutal violence. It's not a happy series by any stretch, but it's a very, very good one and a very entertaining one to read, because these characters, they just grow on you. The main female character of this book, I didn't particularly care for at first, but she's grown to be very strong in her own way, in that even though she's becoming stronger, she's not necessarily becoming she's not becoming a fighter or more militaristic herself. She's becoming strong in her own way, and there's a lot to digest with this series. I will say one of my complaints is that there are 2 unnecessary love triangles, basically. But other than that, I really enjoy this series. Like I said, I fly through these books because I can't put them down. They are so action-packed, especially the second one, A Torch Against the Night. This book was just go, go, go from the very first page, and I appreciate that, especially in a lot of YA books, because sometimes they are very slow and you want some action, and this series definitely delivered. If you have not picked it up yet, I would highly recommend it. These are fantastic. So the next book I want to talk about is part of a series, I'll give it that, but this is just, I only really want to talk about this book being my favorite, and that is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This series, everyone, if you're on BookTube, you know about this series, but if you haven't heard, it just generally follows Faye, our main character in the first book, Feyre, ends up killing a Fae and is whisked away to the Fae lands from her human lands as punishment. It is sort of a Beauty and the Beast-esque retelling, and this book, though, this book blew me away when I first read it. I liked A Court of Thorns and Roses. It was good. I think I gave it like a 4.5. Like, I enjoyed it the way I just tend to enjoy Sarah J. Maas's books. But this book, man, this was something else. I just fell in love with these characters in a way I hadn't fallen in love with before. And I fell in love with the story and the world. And overall, I just absolutely adore this book. Yes, it is very problematic in a lot of ways. I completely understand the criticisms it's getting, and I recognize those issues. I'm not brushing them under the rug because I love this book. I recognize how undiverse and just questionable romances these books tend to have. However, I can't get over the initial feelings I had when I read this book. Was disappointed as hell by the third one, though. Even though I gave it a 4.5 or 5-star, but upon reflecting, I was like, oh, no. And so, as of now, this is my favorite in the series. It'll probably stay my favorite in the series. None of the other books can touch this one. So the next series I want to talk about is one I've just recently started talking about, but I've talked about it a lot, and that is The Witcher series by Andrzej Sapkowski. Could have said that wrong. If I did, I apologize. And this series is just, it's so good. Now, I've only read the first set of short stories, which is like a prequel to his original trilogy. I read the first one of those, and I read the first book in the original trilogy. I like the prequel short stories a lot better, but overall, this world is super gripping and is super interesting. I did play Witcher 3, so I know a lot of what happens if the books follow the games, and I know a lot of the story and the characters already going into these books, but that did not deter my enjoyment. Basically, if you have not heard me talk about these books before, or if you haven't played the games or anything, The Witcher is set in a world that is very grim. Like, I don't really know another word for it. I've used that word a lot in this video, but it is a world that is populated with, like, monsters and bad things. Ghouls, ghosts, demons, like, zombie creatures. Like, it is not a good time for the people that live there. And so, because the need arose, a class of people called the Witchers were created. The Witchers are trained from a very young age, like from 10 or 11, to fight these monsters. Their bodies go through a series of mutations to become more adept at fighting these monsters. And Geralt, our main character of the series, is one of the most prominent Witchers to exist. He gets up to a lot of shenanigans and meets a lot of interesting characters along the way, and fights monsters because, that's what he's born to do. And what I love about the series is that while it does have the standard ghost and things like that, it also has some very interesting spins on these characters and interesting spin on these monsters, and I just appreciate that because it's not just basic, let's go fight these zombies. So let's fight this miscarried fetus that became a monster because it was unloved. It's brutal. There are brutal monsters, it's a brutal story, and a lot of also morally gray characters. It's great. I love the series so much. I definitely plan to continue reading these books because I love them. So the last book I want to talk about today is one I've also talked about recently. You can tell I've read some very good fantasy books recently, and that is going to be Homeland by R.A. Salvatore. This is the first book in The Dark Elf trilogy. It is the first trilogy in the Forgotten Realms series, which is I think there's 10 different trilogies set in this world. They all take place with different characters at different points in time and just give you a basic history. These are steeped really heavily in D&D lore. This is one of the 3 canons that a lot of players who play D&D will follow. This trilogy, like I said, is the Dark Elf trilogy. It follows Drizzt. He is a dark elf born in a world that he doesn't understand. The Dark Elves live in a world or a place called the Underdark. It is like a giant cavern underground. They do not see light at all. They are completely adept to living underground. They can see in infrared, and they are not good people. They are more or less, they are very evil, and their society is like based really heavily in subterfuge and in, you know, killing someone else to further your own agenda, to further your place in society. This society really like appreciates that as long as it's done in a very sneaky way. If you straight up murder your neighbors but leave witnesses, you'll be punished. But if you murder your neighbors and don't leave witnesses, then the goddess that they favor will like be like, good job, and will grant and bestow them with an additional gifts. I like this series a lot. I've only read the first one, Homeland, but it really stuck out to me. Drizzt is like, doesn't understand why his family and why the people he grew up with and like his society is so evil. He rebels against it in the ways he can, and it just deals with him growing up and like learning about what it means to be a drow or a dark elf. It's good. Drizzt's a bit of a Gary Stew. He's really good at everything, but beyond that, this series is so fun and enjoyable, and I'm definitely looking forward to picking up the next one sometime soon and seeing where Drizzt goes next, because this book kind of left off on a big cliffhanger and I need to know. So those are all the books/series that have made my favorite fantasy book/series ever. Now, I'm sure, honestly, I could probably think of some more. Obviously, I didn't want to mention Harry Potter because if you've been on my channel before, you know I love Harry Potter. That's kind of an obvious one. I tried to pick some that I either don't talk about as frequently or are more unheard of on BookTube, don't get talked about that often. So yeah, I hope to definitely add more to the list as this year goes on. I want to read all the good fantasy books, and if that is the case, I will definitely be making like a sequel, I guess, video to this one. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and follow me on all of my social media, which is always linked down below, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!